want to talk a little bit about the treatment of HS and the future of HS and what that looks like. Because for a really long time, we have kind of been in the shadows and not had a lot of attention paid to us as a disease state. And that has dramatically changed. I'd say in the last, especially year, like since AAD last year, basically, it was like the light switch flipped and all of a sudden HS was all over the place and the interest was huge. So we want to kind of talk about what the landscape looks like now and what the future looks like, and then things that we can do to help keep HS in the spotlight so that we get more and more treatment options so that we can all live better lives. So I'll let you do this one.
Perfect. And like Brenly said, it was really exciting at our AAD, American Academy of Dermatology meeting, because HS is so hot right now. People finally care. Derms, like 10 years ago, we would have a talk on HS and the room would be this big and partially full. Now they have to give us the biggest rooms in the conference center. All the seats are full and people are standing around the walls. It is like so popular.
I actually cried at the last one because there were so many people there.
TikTok, I think about it a lot of platforms. People share so much more on there and influence that. I 100% do because I've been online for a long time before TikTok existed, and like the switch of like what people share on there,
Yep.
all of a sudden,
Yeah.
the awareness is incredible.
I think they're realizing it's not as rare as everybody has always thought that it was too, which is also helping kind of amplify that.
Yep. And then people too, a lot of derms, it's a hard disease to treat, right? So they would kind of get frustrated and give up. But then now that we have approved medications, they're like, okay, wait. And it's medications. So far, they're medications we've used for like psoriasis and other things before. So they're coming back to it going, I know how to use these drugs. Let me try it for my HS patients. So it's kind of gotten people more interested in it. And then, like you said, with the social media and patients becoming more aware and coming back, all the patients too, who it was like, well, everyone gave up on me, but now there's new stuff. I'm going to go back and see a doctor. So it's just a really great time. So the advancements have been so amazing in the last few years. The treatment options, we really want a cure, of course, but now we're sort of looking at controlling disease, getting things under control, getting you into a remission. And then
I think they touched on this earlier was like the, oh, has it really helped? Well, no, it hasn't because I still get flares. Okay, so a cure would mean no flares further, right? But what happens is, and it's happened to, I think, Caitlin as well during her experience, is that she did not think that it was helping her, but because she didn't keep a flare journal or anything like that, we couldn't really attest to whether it actually was helping or not. Because our recall bias, like how much backwards we remember, is really limited. So you're only going to remember your last really big flare potentially, and not all of the time that you've spent without a flare during that time. Whereas in the past, if you hadn't been on medication, that you would have been flaring that entire time. So I think it's one of the things that people misunderstand, that it's a treatment and not a cure. So it's really important to set expectations for people. And they'll say, well, I'm still getting, abscesses, but how often? And are they as bad as they used to be? Do they stick around as long as they used to? Looking at it from that entire perspective and not just, yes, but I'm still getting them. Because we would all love for there to be a cure, but there isn't one for cancer yet, so I can't see one coming for HS anytime soon.
Yeah.
But as long as we have more treatment options, we'd be way better off.
Yes, and hopefully everyone in the room knows there is a free app. If you look up hidradenitis suppurativa papaya, there's a free app that has useful information. It's got a link to the patient guide. Also, there's a patient guide. I'll come back to that in a second. So the free app, you can track your symptoms, you can track flares, and then it actually will give you a report you can show your doctor of like how you've been doing since the last visit. There's also a patient guide where we put in normal people language all the information about HS, and it's free, hspatientguide.com. It's phenomenal.
Any idea when it's going to be available with Samsung and Android? Because it's only available to iPhones.
I know they say it's coming.
I'll text her when we're on break and ask. Yeah, because I know they were trying to get it at the first of the year, but they were having issues. So I'll text her and ask, remind me, and see when we can get that.
Doesn't make sense because they all glitch the hell on Samsung. Sorry, not sorry, but that's why. apps for Samsung for Android because they don't work. Android is so much better. You work for Amazon and Microsoft.
So we have an iPhone pitch happening.
Right?
You guys are the reason my messages aren't blue. Okay, so then we will. Oops.
Oh, we lost our TV again.
Uh-oh. Is it bad? Oh, I think it's this.
Little wiggle. Okay, you fixed
Okay.
it.
Oh my God, steer clear of this area. Okay, so a little bit of talk about clinical trials. Just as a plug, HS Connect is working on and will have out this year a clinical trial series, demystifying clinical trials. So our goal with that is to basically explain the process of clinical trials to the layperson so that we can all understand what happens during a clinical trial, what this means, what to expect. We know that they are very overwhelming and scary to people who've never participated because all of the language is crazy town, and it seems like a very daunting thing to take on. But I think if we break it down and kind of demystify what actually happens, then we'll see an increase in the number of people who are participating. So just a plug for that, it'll be coming out. It'll be a webinar series.
Will you partner with Brave Patient Voice?
Probably not on that one. We're just doing that one on our own. Because they do a lot more in the way of surveys and studies as opposed to clinical trials. Yeah. So, and the other good part about this is that we are being asked more and more and more to participate in study design at the very beginning. So, this is a huge thing because we're working to make clinical trials easier for patients and put the onus of figuring out how to make it work better for patients back on the pharma company. No offense, guys. But that is actually what they're inviting us to do and to participate in figuring out how to do that. So that means maybe it's somebody coming to your house instead of you going to the doctor's office, limiting the number of times you have to go to the doctor's office, those kinds of things. So we are being invited to participate in those, which is amazing. And that's a huge change from where it used to be like, nope, this is the way it's done. We're just going to keep doing it this way. So, and then you want to talk about their role?
Yeah, so as you probably know, clinical trials are super important. That's how things get to market, which gives them a lot more power. Companies are not allowed to recommend a treatment to you legally unless it's FDA approved. So they're not allowed. So even if we kind of know some things that work, the company is not legally allowed to say, try this for your HS, it could work. Now, we doctors use stuff off label sometimes, but it's much easier when things are on label to get it covered by the insurance as well. Clinical trials are super expensive for the companies. That's why drug prices is part of the reason that they're high, is because it costs a lot to do these trials. It is amazing, like the number of people who are involved with it, where there's the people doing the trial. So like we do trials in our office. So there's me, and then I have a full-time person who just keeps track of all the paperwork and all like getting the shipment of the medication, storing it, administering it, calling you to come into the visit. So they're super expensive, and that's why it's a little bit of a burden, like a hurdle to get there. But they're so important for us to have these FDA approved medications available. And I think everybody in the room knows it's important that we have more and we have variety. So if one thing doesn't work for you, we can try something else. If you have a side effect, there's somewhere else we can go and look for. And then they're, like Brindley said, they're really well designed, and the FDA really pushes safety. So you do the full consent before you get involved, where they tell you all the potential risks, kind of walk through everything that's involved with it. You're monitored all along the way to see if you have any side effects, if you have any issues, how you're doing. So you get a lot of like very close one-on-one attention if you're in a clinical trial. And then do you want me to talk about the diversity part, or do you want to do that one?
I'll talk. So a lot of people too think that when you go to a clinical trial, you're walking into like UCB's headquarters, and then you're going to be in a room full of people in, white coats, and it's actually done in doctors' offices for the most part. So it's really not as overwhelming as it seems from the outset. So most of the time you're just going in for a visit. You'll know ahead of time what the expectations are for that visit, if you're going to need a blood draw, if you're going to need whatever done. So it's really nice. And we're also working with pharma on making sure that that's laid out easily for the patient to understand how many visits you have to go to and what that looks like as well. And then, yeah, if you want to talk about diversity.
Yeah, diversity is super important in clinical trials, and we have not been doing a good job of it historically. Psoriasis trials are the worst. They will have, I think, 5% non-white people in them traditionally. So then representation matters, right? If the person in the trial does not look like you, do you know it's going to work for you? Plus, we know that HS is a diverse disease. We need men, we need women, we need all different races, we need different ages. So it's really important that we have that diversity in our trials. And it can be challenging for recruitment because depending, like we said, it's in a doctor's office. Well, if that doctor lives in Vermont, it's like almost all white people in Vermont. But if we can get it like in Detroit, I can get more diversity for their trial and help to recruit patients from my neighborhood and my community who can help out. Do we have a slide on medical mistrust?
No.
Okay.
It's one of the definite things we're going to cover in the webinar series 2 is the medical mistrust piece.
Yes, because as you guys are probably aware, there's a history of systemic racism and overt racism in research and in science. Things like the Tuskegee experiment, where they experimented on black men without them even knowing. They just gave them syphilis to see what would happen if you didn't treat syphilis. Horribly racist. And so we fully know that there is a mistrust. Like people have sometimes culturally, people come to a trial like, I'm not here to be the guinea pig. I'm not here to be experimented on. But that's where we're really trying to make really positive efforts to let people know, no, it's welcoming. We are doing things the right way now, but we want diversity in the trials. We want everyone to be represented in the trials. So we're working really hard to overcome all the sins of the past and do things the right way now. And I will tell you guys, I'm always so proud of my HS community because HS patients are the most eager to help research of any patient I've ever dealt with. They are always like, yes, and I will help with any research you are doing. I will do. And it's always the same reason is I want to help other people. If this will help someone else, like we're doing a genetic study right now where there's nothing in it for you. You just give us a blood sample so we can run a DNA test. We don't have any like answers to give you, but everyone's like, yep. If this will help other people get diagnosed earlier, if this will help us crack this equation, I'm in for it. Versus like, I have other studies we're doing that are much easier. I'm like, well, you fill out this survey, and people are like, oh, I'm busy. No, thanks. So the HS community is hungry to help us do better and learn more.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And survey
Yes.
fatigue is a real thing, and clinical trial, like that fatigue is a real thing, and we're working on that as well, where, you have to go through all of these questionnaires first to find out if you qualify, and then, you don't, and then next time something like that comes up, you just don't want to do it again because you've been turned down. So trying to make sure that all of the inclusion and exclusion criteria are very clear and upfront so you can make a decision about whether you could qualify for that study before kind of digging in even deeper. So I think this one was short and sweet. Yes, and then our role as advocates with clinical trials, same thing with surveys and studies, because again, we don't have the diversity that we need. And this is why we need you guys, because you have a broader reach than we do, and we need you to help partner with us to get the information out to everybody. So our goal is to educate the community. So like I said, we'll be hosting webinars on clinical trials, including like what a phase 2B is. Like, just because when you look at that, no one has any idea. And clinicaltrials.gov, no offense government, but is the worst website. I mean, people who are in clinical trials are like, I'm not really sure what that means. So it's a horrible place to go to look for information there. And then to provide opportunities to notify the community when new opportunities come up so that we can recruit, encourage participation, and make that diversity possible. And then explain and encourage. So somebody said this before, I can't remember who it was. What if it doesn't work? But what if it does? I mean, if it doesn't work, then you can potentially go back on the medication you were on previously, but you gave it a shot. And then what if it does work?
Mhm.
I mean, we've seen a lot of success stories out of clinical trial participants. So there's a possibility that it could work.
If it does work, the people in the trial, can they stay on whatever they're on?
In most trials, yes.
Yes.
They have an option for that at the end. Yeah.
Yes, and we always push for that. There's a couple, sometimes the early, like the phase 2 ones, you can't because it's not that step, but the phase 3, like the last step before it's there, and that's the big ones, we push that they always have to. And what's great is the company covers it because when you're in the trial, you get it for free. So I've had a lot of patients where, when there was one drug approved, if it didn't work, we were like, let's look for a trial because your insurance won't pay for anything else. Let's get a trial. And then if it works for you, you get to keep taking it. And they want to keep following people for years to make sure, like, let's see what happens if people are on it for years. So they'll be like, yep, you're going to be on it for like your life for free. We're going to do 5 years, 10 years. Like they want to keep people on it, especially if it's working.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So again, encouragement. Yes.
I wanted to ask him because we are from London, and I wanted to know more about the trials in Europe. Do you have any visibility? Are there any? Is it only US that is doing this?
No, most trials actually make a point to have sites throughout the world. So that diversity isn't just within the US, it's kind of throughout the world. I'm not as up on everything in other places, but I think Europe is pretty similar to the way things run in the US. But definitely they try to get sites all across the world so that they can have patients with all different backgrounds. But yeah, and I don't know how you find them. Like Brindley said, there's this.
That was the next question, how to find them. Like if I wanted to get a trial and I'm living in London and we're living in London, how can we get on these trials? Or that my followers in Scandinavia, especially in Finland, they 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 would probably want to go on a trial as well, but like how to find these trials.
Yeah.
Yes.
Vicky, did you have?
Follow-up for you because we get trials in numerous countries. Okay. Us or other companies, so let's find out where we can access where the place we can look about where the trials can run. So I'll find out. Oh,
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I think John Ingram does them, right? And what's he at?
Yeah.
Cardiff?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So no, that's a good question.
And there's a European HS Foundation
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. So
And one thing we forgot to mention is, so you guys have seen like a couple medications come to market. There is one that the trial is already done. They're just in like the application process. So we'll probably be seeing that by the end of the year, which is from UCB, which is fantastic. There's a bunch more that are in the process. Right now on clinicaltrials.gov, there are over 50 studies going on for HS, which is amazing because, again, 10 years ago, it was like one or two, if even that. So there's a lot of amazing things. And you know how the biologics target like part of the immune system. They block this thing in your blood that triggers the inflammation. They are looking at so many different targets. They have different outcomes. There's a trial going on right now for a medication that actually looks at can it reduce the number of draining tunnels, which normally we looked more at like the inflammatory papules, pustules, nodules. This one's looking at the tunnels, which I was always like, oh, tunnels need surgery, but they're trying to like get medications for the tunnels. So it is so exciting. There are trials. There's at least a handful that are looking at surgery, combining surgery with medicine, new surgery techniques. There's one where they're looking at just putting a laser into the tunnels and treating tunnels from the inside with a laser. There are wound care studies. We're doing one on acupuncture for pain in HS. Like it is blowing up, which is just spectacular. So it's great for people to kind of be aware that this is happening, that you can participate in these things, and even just to have that hope that not everyone is going to make it to market or is going to result in positive results. But the more we have going on, the more that are, and the more great things are going to come out and more options we're going to have.
yes, which means hopefully there will be an option for everyone eventually that will give some relief to symptom management. So I think we're going to kind of switch up. Are there any questions on that? Sorry. It's a good time to have HS, y'all. It's never a good time to have HS, but it's a really, really good time to have HS
Best
right now.
time it's ever been.
Yes.
Never heard anything low dose naltrexone for HS.
I have. I'm not sure if anyone has actually studied it, but I love low dose naltrexone. It's a great anti-inflammatory. It can even sometimes help a little bit with mood. If people don't know naltrexone, the brand name is Narcan, so it's what they give people if they're overdosing on an opiate, a drug. But that dose is like 50 milligrams. So then people started looking at this low dose of 1 to 5 milligrams, and they found that it helps with inflammation. It can kind of calm the immune system down a little bit. So we've been throwing it at like everything because there's almost no side effects. And even the dose is so small that even if you're on a pain medication, it's still fine. It's not going to impact your pain medication. So yeah, I have to look again. I don't know that I've seen studies on it, but I know people are using it.
A lot of doctors don't. 'Cause I take it now for just like arthritis, like joint pain, and like it's crazy because when I go to a new doctor and they're like, "What? Why are you taking naltrexone?" I'm like, "No, low dose."
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're so confused.
I'm not gonna lie, but he's asked me that. And recently, I just had a conversation with Laura Johnson about whether I think you are able to sit in there. Which county is it that she said that's where.
Mm-hmm.
It's having this moment all over social media, which I guess is good that people out here. The studies are not great. They show like a slight improvement. But like Dr. David will say, the side effect profile is so low.
No, then
Why do not try it? I think you can set space of, you have to set expectations that it's not gonna be a cure-all.
right.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
heard about it.
Part of treatment.
Circle.
Yes. Yeah.
Was taking the LVN, but then I was also put on spironolactone. I don't know if one of those, but one of those caused me severe depression to the point where I had suicidal thoughts, and that's never been in my character. So like, I don't know which one of those caused it, but I did experience that. It's pretty scary.
Right. Yeah, and that's what's hard when you kind of start things more than one thing at one time. Is then when you have a side effect, you go, "What do I do?" But at the same time, if the HS is bad, we're like, "Well, we're throwing everything we got at it."
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a hard one. I'm not even sure which one to call. That it's more likely that caused it, but I'm glad you identified that that's what it was. So you could stop it and get back to feeling normal.
Immediately, and I fixed normal. I don't have no thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, the low dose naltrexone, sometimes it gives people like more vivid, realistic dreams when they first start it. So some people love it. They're like, "Oh, this is great." Other people are like, "Nah, my dreams are not great."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Do you think that is there any study if vaccines could like cause a genetic mutation that can trigger HS, like or make HS dormant in a person?
I haven't seen anything in that sense. We did a lot when COVID hit. We got active and we did a registry. So some of you might have even shared your data where we said, all right, if you have HS, you can report your data if you get COVID, if you get a vaccine, and we collected information about like how did it go. And then we also looked at people who went to the hospital and said, all right, in people who like just everybody who got COVID without HS compared to people with HS who got COVID. So we learned some really cool things. We learned that, like we said, you could be on your biologics and the vaccines still work. You didn't get worse COVID if you were on the biologic. There was even a trend toward the biologics making you get less severe COVID, but it wasn't significant when we do the statistics, but it looked like it kind of blocked that overreaction to the COVID. And did I already say your risk of getting COVID wasn't higher? Yeah, because we were worried, like, all right, if we're affecting your immune system, how does that impact things? And then, like you said, the vaccines worked when people were on the biologics. That's not something I've really seen studied a lot, is sort of like, do vaccines cause there's this thing called epigenetics, which is like your DNA is the same, but the way your body reads it and uses it is different. And it is crazy how epigenetics works, where you can inherit trauma from family members. So like, if your mother went through the Holocaust, your DNA will be read and interacted with differently because you inherit that. Or like even there was a population where there was a famine, and then their children were more likely to be obese because their DNA had this signal of hold on to all the calories because there's a famine. But they inherited it. So we haven't really studied that too much. What I will say is there's probably not a signal, only because we've used vaccines for so long that it's kind of like when a safety report comes out about sunscreen and they're like, "Oh my gosh," and patients come in to me and go, "Is sunscreen safe?" And I'm like, "Well, you remember on the news all those people who died from sunscreen?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, "That's because it didn't happen. Sunscreen is safe." These like, if there's a major thing, we figure it out, or we get like a clue that there's something to look at there.